Hi, Teo.
Hi, Sworup.
So, continuing our sessions on narratives, I think we're going to talk about some of the more interesting and, I would say weird, but I don't know if weird would be a good descriptive of what we're going to talk about.
I think I'm comfortable with weird. So my first thought was the Matavalasa, which is a very, very interesting play. I think it's technically called the Matavalasa Prahasa, which means like the farce or the comedy. So it's it's not a very well-known play, but it's a comedy play, and it is about religious people. So it's interesting at all that in Sanskrit there's this tradition of, we could say, satirizing religious ascetics, or I would probably say making fun of them, because it really is, it's low blows. It's pretty trashy comedy, I would say. But the Matavalasa is about this Kapalika, right? This Aghori, you could call them, this follower of Shiva, who begs with a kapala, a skull, a human skull begging bowl. And he's kind of a rock star. He's like not too serious about stuff. He's really charming. He's really funny. He's really kind of loose and happy. And he comes on screen with his girlfriend. And they're kind of hanging out. They're going from bar to bar. They're dancing. There's this scene where he's dancing and his dhoti is falling down. He's like waving with one hand and pulling his dhoti up with his other hand. So it's very much this vision of the religious ascetic as someone who has a taste for life, who really likes kind of savoring what life has to offer, be that in the form of women or in the form of drink. And his begging bowl goes missing.
Oh, no.
And this is a real, identity crisis for him, because how can you be a Kapalika if you don't have a Kapala? Just a little piece of comedy. He throws himself on the ground and he's hitting his head. He's going, how could you lose your skull? How could you lose your skull? And then he goes, wait, my skull is right here. At least I have a skull. I don't have my begging bowl, but I do have a skull. I'm still a Kapalika. So he and his, hot girlfriend go looking around for where the skull could be, and they decide that it's hidden in the robes of a Buddhist monk. This is where we get this sort of ubiquitous vision of Buddhist monks across a lot of Sanskrit literature, that Buddhist monks are kind of sneaky. Like there's something up with them. We just don't know about these people with the shaved heads and the big robes. And the way the Buddhist monk is introduced is he's coming home from the house of a very rich layperson. The layperson's name is Dhanadasa, which literally means slave to money. Or to capital or whatever. And he's like patting his belly. He's going, oh my God, Dhanadasa had all the best food. It was just like service after service after service after course after course. It was so delicious. I had such a wonderful time. Good thing the Buddha prescribed for us to eat so well. Good thing the Buddha made sure that his followers would always be so wealthy. And so kind of ready to provide. And then he even, this is how it's scripted. He goes, but something in the suttas, there must be something about having sex with hot women, and it got lost. I just know that the tradition got it lost, and it's like, it's my responsibility as a monk to hang out with hot women, and like this Sutta Pitaka is not letting me. It's so unfair. But so he's sort of caught in this bizarre thought process where he's spitting in the face of everything that Buddhism stands for. And the Kapalika and his girlfriend find him and they go, hey, you give me my bowl back. So he doesn't really know what's going on, but he knows he hates the Kapalika because they're sort of natural enemies. And the Kapalika goes, give me the bowl. The Buddhist goes, which bowl? Well, the bowl right there. I see it. It's under your robes. That's why you have robes that are this big. So you can hide exactly. So you can hide all your secrets. This turns into a fight. The Kapalika and the Buddhist monk are kicking each other in the street. I think the Buddhist throws the first punch, which tells you a lot about the author's perspective on Buddhists. At a certain point, the Kapalika's girlfriend tries to grab the monk by the hair and like drag him down. But of course, the Buddhist monk doesn't have any hair. And so the Buddhist monk gets down on his knees and he prays to the Buddha and he goes, thank you, Buddhaji, for telling me to shave my head so that this bitch couldn't grab me by the hair. This goes on like this for quite a while. Of course, it's a comedy. What ends up happening is that a dog took the bowl because it's made of bone, and then some madman grabs the bowl from the dog, and then they're chasing him around. It's a very comedic scene. I think it's a nice way to open up a discussion of religion that's a little bit more irreverent, because it's not that the Shaiva is behaving abnormally. In fact, the Shaiva is really it's following the rules. They have this short discussion where the Kapalika goes, you know what religion is? Religion is just having a good time. Religion is being with your girlfriend and dancing and drinking and like kind of indulging the pleasures of life. And his girlfriend goes, oh my God, no, don't say that. That's not what Dharma is. Look at what the Jains are doing over there. They're like torturing their bodies. And he quite explicitly says, the Jainas don't know what they're talking about here. The Jainas have sort of mistaken cause for effect, and they think that pleasure can only come from pain, and they're wrong in that. So the Shaiva has somewhat of a theological explanation for why he should indulge life in this way. So yeah, I thought that could open up a conversation about, of course, Shaivas are very interested in Tantra, which becomes the sort of Buddhist mode of expressing transgressive practices and things. So what do you have to say about religious people that are a little weird?
I mean, the idea of crazy wisdom is quite strong, I think, within the Indian tradition. I think it was Kierkegaard who commented that the Indians were so amazing because they had the foresight to see that the one who actually sees reality is kind of crazy and should be respected. I mean, he says it in a kind of a melancholic sense, as Kierkegaard is, but there is an allusion to sort of this crazy wisdom type sort of stuff. It's everywhere. It's within the Hindu tradition. These people are called avadhutas, right? Which just means like not. It's like not ordinary. It's like something extraordinary, let's say. They're extraordinary in that sense. And so you get stories of these avadhutas. They're similar, they're like your Kapalika from the Matavilasa. There's this, so because they've transcended duality and so on, that they do a lot of weird stuff, let's say. And both the Hindu and Buddhist tradition is full of these. So you get the 84 Mahasiddhas both in the Hindu tradition and the Buddhist tradition. And the Mahasiddhas have very colorful stories. And it's to the normal reader, these just seem like just what is going on. and usually they'll put in some poetry about duality, about seeing reality somewhere in the middle of the story. I have gone past the good and the bad, and the delicious and the non-delicious, and pleasure and pain, and they're all of the same taste. So the idea of everything being of the same taste is very, very strong. And one of these stories, I think would be very interesting to our folk, is the story of this guy Virupa. And Virupa is a Mahasiddha, right? He's born somewhere around Bengal.
What year are we talking about?
So we have no idea. Okay. So most of these Mahasiddha stories are written a long time later. Than when they would have been purportedly existing, but historically, a lot of these stories start popping up from the time that Tantra sort of becomes kind of mainstream. So we're talking about 5th, 6th-ish. It's very difficult to date, but that's the general ballpark that these stories start coming in. But then they're not written down until much later, or they're written down by somebody else. And even the biographers are sometimes a little bit whacked. They were, so that's how they write these stories. And so we're talking about Virupa, and he's born somewhere in Bengal during the reign of King Devpala, apparently. So he's as a young child, he's made to enter this Buddhist monastic academy, which is very famous, Nalanda. You'll see many of these Mahasiddhas, they're originally from one of these monasteries, and they get kicked out for doing some weird stuff. and in essence, that's what happens with Virupa as well. So he's in Somapuri. And he's trying to meditate on Vajravarahi.
Okay.
So
which is
who is this female tantric figure? She has a sow head. Varahi, as in the female, the sow basically coming out of her head. She's a tantric sort of Dakini goddess, whatever, sort of depending on what point of view you want to look at it from. And so he one of the requirements of tantra is you have to chant mantras many times. Okay, so Virupa has recited her mantra twice 10 million times. So 20 million times he's recited Vajavarahi's mantra, and yet nothing happens. There's no realization. She doesn't appear to him. She doesn't bless him with anything. Doesn't gain any sort of tantric siddhis. And he gets so angry, he throws his rosary into the toilet. He's like...
I'm on board so far. Yeah. It's 20 million times. It's a lot.
He's been very angry. He throws it into the toilet, and then in his fit of anger. And then once time comes for worship, because in Tantra you're supposed to sort of decide on worship times, and otherwise they're given to you. And during the evening time when he's supposed to perform his worship, he's like, he looks for his rosary and it's not there because he's sort of forgotten that he threw it into the toilet. And so it's a moment of crisis for him. And then in that moment of crisis, Vajavarahi appears to him and says, you know what, you're favored by me. Don't worry, you'll have realization soon enough. And you have to get rid of all this thinking that you're doing, just have awareness and forget that the shabda and the artha are the same, or are they different? And it doesn't, just transcend this dual existence of samsara that you're trapped in, right?
It's not about philosophy.
Yeah.
Which is to say, at this point in Buddhism, this is like the high point, the apex of Buddhist philosophy, where Buddhists are doing philosophy on a level that like other people are playing catch up in terms of linguistic philosophy and metaphysics and things.
Yeah, a lot of this, you get a little bit of this idea within the Advaita Vedanta stuff that maybe we'll talk about later. But so that's what happens, and so Virupa, he's unable to proceed with his prayer on that day. But since Vajavarahi says, don't worry, just do your mantra practice and so on. So it takes 12 years again. So where he's, doing the sadhana of Vajavarahi before he finally has Mahamudra realization, the realization of the epic realization of the sameness of everything. No more duality. And he sees no contradiction in eating meat or drinking alcohol, right? Between being celibate and being, horny and doing stuff. And these are against the rules of the monastic order in Somapuri, right? And one day he's like, you know what? I want pigeon pie. He wants pigeon to be cooked in some, delicious sense, and he orders his servants to cook pigeon for him.
He has servants. He's a monk. He has servants.
Yeah, he has servants. Okay. Yeah. And they catch a few pigeons. They cook delicious pigeon for him, and so he's having fun on that sense. And then there's a monk, elderly monk, who sees that these pigeons that he's used to seeing every day around the monastery have disappeared. She's like, somebody ate the pigeons. Find out who ate the pigeons. And then they reach Virupa, right? And Virupa is just chilling with wine and pigeon. And he's eating wine and pigeon, and the monks are very outraged, right? And they kick him out from Somapuri, and they strip him of his monk category and so on, and he's ordered to leave. And then the gatekeeper at Somapuri says, "Where are you going, bro?" And he's like, "You know what? They don't want me here, so I'm just going to go anywhere." and then he sort of leaves. Okay, and as he's leaving, there's this lotus-filled pond or lake or something that's kind of nearby the monastery, and he touches the lotus like with his foot, and he realizes he has no weight, so the lotus isn't sort of dipping under his weight. So he just floats on the lotus. He walks across, and then he's like, you know what? I think he has gained siddhi, right? Because he's transcended duality and so on. And then everybody sees this, and it's like Jesus walking on water, right? It's like, oh my God, who is this guy? And
this
people,
meat eater.
Yeah. So then what happens is, they're like, my God, this guy is something else. And so they bring the monastery people, they hear of this and they bring him back. They're like, what are you doing? How did you gain these like powers and siddhis and so on? And you're like a meat eater, you're an alcohol eater and so on. And he says, you know what? Everything is an illusion. So
say it again for the people in the back.
So everything is an illusion. So these pigeons, they weren't really there, in essence, they weren't really there. They're illusory. And then so they get a pigeon wing, and then he sort of brings the pigeons he ate back to life using his magical sort of siddhi powers. And then they're like, wow, so amazing. But then he's like, you know what, you guys didn't want me before I showed you this, so I'm going to leave. So
for someone who's transcended all emotions and all duality, he sure seems petty.
Yeah. So he leaves, and then he's walking around, and he gets very thirsty and very hungry, and he reaches Ganga, and he's like, he asks, yo, Ganga Devi, I'm really hungry, thirsty. Can I drink? And Ganga Devi's like, no, you can't drink from me. He's like, okay, whatever. And so he goes to this tavern, this in Nepali what we'd call a bhatti. Okay. So he goes to a bhatti. And he starts eating food there, right? And he starts drinking. He's just piling alcohol on top of alcohol on top of alcohol. And he drinks the tavern dry, essentially. Okay. Then the time comes to clear his bill. And so the tavern owner, this woman comes to him, and he's like, yo, bro, you have to pay for all this alcohol that you've drunk. And Virupa is like, how about I pay you with the sun? She's like, no, please. I just, she wants money, obviously. And Virupa just ignores her, takes his vajra, this vajra kila, his purba, and then he throws it at the sun, and then the sun sticks in the sky, and the sun can't move anymore. And that's his kind of payment, or the way he pays for this. And it's so bad. The sun has been shining down for 2 days, 3 days. The plants are starting to die. The rivers are starting to clear up. It's very hot. And so the king is like, what is going on with the sun? And then the people tell, oh, there's this Virupa guy, he threw his purpa because he couldn't pay his debt off, and that's why the sun is in the sky for this long. And the king is in some sense forced to, clear the debt on Virupa's behalf, so that Virupa will remove the kila from the sun, and normal life can resume. So he pays off Virupa's debt. So, and then Virupa just goes around. He has no worry in the world. That's how he pays his debt. And this is a realized Mahasiddha. And so he flies across the heavens. He reaches another place, the country of Indra. Apparently, there was that had a lot of devout Brahmins, and they were worshipping Mahadeva with a statue or a Shivalinga that was very high. They're like, yo, bro, this is Mahadeva's shrine. You should bow down before him. And Virupa was like, how can an elder brother bow down before his younger brother? They're like, what, bro? So they get offended very much, and they're like, you know what, you bow down or you die.
Yeah, okay.
Right. So he's like, okay, I'll bow down, but if anything happens, you guys are the one that made me bow down. So he bows down, and sort of the stone cracks, right? And then a voice comes from the heavens. Okay, basically, and this is Mahadeva who says, you know what, Virupa, you don't need to bow down before me. I am actually at your command. Okay,
this is a person that's turning everything on its head.
Yeah,
everything is wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And then and so Virupa basically says, Mahadeva, you have to follow the Buddha. You're going to have to protect the Buddha Dharma, and that's how he converts essentially Shiva to being Mahadeva. He uses the powers of Heruka or Chakrasamvara to do this because he subdues Shiva. And so he goes around, asking demons to also protect the dharma and so on, and then he sort of reaches liberation and goes to the paradise of the Dakinis, and that's pretty fun, I guess. And he is a worshipped figure, or a figure that's revered within the Siddha tradition.
Yeah.
And he's this drunk guy that eats meat, that goes around. He doesn't care about people. He throws his purpa into the sky and causes a drought for like 2 or 3 days and so on. So Virupa is just one example of the Mahasiddhas doing this. Right. There are so many Mahasiddhas that have so many weird stuff going on. And there are sort of there's the story of Tilopa, for example, right? And Tilopa is working with prostitutes and so on, and he's just having a fun time.
Like he's pimping them out, or he's like indulging.
He's kind of like their bodyguard, servant-ish,
Sure.
So something like that. But we have no idea. There are stories of Mahasiddhas having multiple girlfriends, hanging around, and almost all of these explanations end by sort of saying that even this is an illusion.
Yeah.
Right. And and many of the times they kill themselves, or maybe they kill their girlfriends or somebody's, because of the way the story works. And they bring them back to life because everything is an illusion. There are stories like of the Mekhala and her sister who chop their head off, and then they're still alive, and then they become Dakinis because they've gained so much realization. There are stories of Mahasiddhas who eat their rug and their kambala, the robe that they're wearing, because that's also an illusion. And the stories of Mahasiddhas are pretty wild, and I think a few of the other ones maybe that are worth talking about are the stories of Tilopa and Naropa. So we already talked about Tilopa. He hangs out with prostitutes, gets the realization from Vajradhara himself, the highest Buddhist tantric deity. And Naropa, his disciple, comes, and he has to face trials. Basically, Naropa has to face trials in order to get to meet Tilopa. So stuff like there's a leper woman that blocks his way and so on. Earthworms and that cause him troubles along his way, etc., etc. But what's really interesting is once he meets Tilopa, because he has to get rid of his karmic background that he has collected, he has to get rid of this, and so Tilopa puts him through multiple trials, and these trials are pretty wild. So Tilopa says, he points to a cliff and said, if I actually had a disciple who wanted to learn the dharma, they would have no hesitation jumping over that cliff. And so Naropa sees this, and he knows that he's talking about him, and Naropa jumps off the cliff and he doesn't die, but he's in a lot of pain. And in some ways, his etymology is related to that. It's like no death sort of pain, kind of. And then Tilopa comes around and is like, you're a good disciple. And then he heals him back to life. Okay, and then, like he's good as new. So using his yogi powers. And then the next time Tilopa's like, if I actually had a good disciple, he would jump in this fire. And so Naropa jumps into the fire. And if I actually had a good disciple, he would bring me the queen's jewelry. And then people beat Naropa up to death, and he brings him back to life. And so Naropa has to go through these many, many trials in order to gain favor from Tilopa. And later on, the same motif of going through trials in order to gain, remove your karmic debt. And these are pretty wild trials. Follows up again in the story of Milarepa and his guru Marpa, who is again a disciple of Naropa. So there's almost a lineage of gurus sort of
punishing their
students. It's pretty interesting how these Mahasiddha stories are shaping up, and this idea of crazy wisdom starts being built up.
I mean, I'm perturbed by I'm thinking like sociologically through these things. What is the effect on listeners to hear these stories? I mean, the gist of it is, well, you're going to be out and about in your daily life, and you're going to see monks doing awful things, just really, really bad things that disgust you, things that upset you, things that hurt others, and it's your job to just pull back and say, he's enlightened.
Yeah,
I guess he'll bring that prostitute back to life. Who am I to say?
Absolutely, because the whole thrust of this is that they have recognized reality for what it actually is, and you haven't.
Yeah.
So how can you comment on anything? Is the general gist, and you get a lot of vulgar stuff too within Tantra, where it's there's a lot of blood drinking, there's a lot of talk about sweat, and a lot of eating feces, or eating feces being a part of you, sort of not seeing duality anymore,
or eating the feces, and then it literally becoming amrita
in your mouth. Exactly. And so it's kind of almost a, how do I put this, it's a test that you have to go through, and it's pretty interesting how much there's what we would consider vulgar stuff within a lot of the literature. Like you talked about the Matavilasa with this, making fun of religion. There's all this, you're supposed to be compassionate, but then, I will ask my disciple to jump off a cliff or whatever. There's prostitute stuff. There's a lot of, killing, chopping your own head off, so stuff like that, and it's just it's formed itself into the tradition so much that it just becomes normal, almost. I mean, right now it could be very abnormal, but then there's avadhutas. They are extraordinary sort of people.
It's a difficult line to toe, even when you're thinking about it historically, because how do you square the fact that, well, we have these texts that say these things, so clearly they were mainstream enough, and they enjoyed enough institutional support that these texts got all the way to us, and yet all of the texts are talking about how they're so exceptional, and how none of the other monks at Nalanda wanted to understand this wisdom, and how Virupa is just this like lone rock star guy who's doing whatever he wants. And so this sort of historical status of these practices, were they popular? Were they not popular? Were they elite? Were they banned?
Yeah, I mean, later on, you start getting commentaries that say, okay, these are all metaphors. That's very common. So I don't know concretely right now if that's sort of a conservative read on, like, trying to justify these things by trying to say, it's a metaphor. Excuse me. But lots of and these stories bring into question the actual religion that they sort of claim to be for, because if there's going to be killing, and there's going to be sort of vama stuff, left-handed stuff, like eating fish intestines and so on, then where does, like, is compassion then a part of duality or not, right? Is morality a part of duality or not? So I think and a lot of times this crazy wisdom stuff, even to the modern day, it starts causing sociological problems, because you get stories of people claiming to be this crazy wisdom guy who start abusing people because they're just crazily wise, and then they form sort of almost a cult-like following. Right.
Which in Pali Buddhism, this is one of the parajikas, right? This is one of the offenses that can get you kicked out of monasticism in general, claiming powers that you don't have to manipulate the lay populace.
Yeah, exactly. And you're not supposed to be generally showing these siddhis, right? For example, the Buddha forbids these. And so it really brings the entire sort of nicety, this whole conservative bent on religion to question. And, nowadays religion is taken so seriously and so on. But then clearly the people who wrote, for example, the Matavilasa, like you said, didn't think that it should be taken that seriously.
And especially the Matavilasa, it's interesting, was written by a king, by the king of that territory.
Yeah.
So there's a certain vision of religious homogeneity, which also was obviously not the case, because this king was living in a space where Shaivas were beating up Brahmanas, were making fun of Jains. So there's like a plurality to the religious space where almost a certain comedy or a certain levity needs to be a part of it, because you don't have domination of one religion over.
Yeah, I mean, it could be easier for the kings to get away with this.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. I mean, the layperson, if he did this, then he might face issues. But then he's the king, so no issue on that front. It's not like these are in these weird tantric texts only. These weird stories.
This is all over the place.
They're sprinkled all over the place. I mean, the Mahabharata has a lot of sort of weird stories, especially with regards to how the 5 Pandavas, manage their relationship with Draupadi, and how like there are sort of almost comedic scenes, like the weapons being inside the room, where I think, was it Arjuna who's in the room? I think
Arjuna wants to get in the room because some demon, I think, is destroying the city, and the weapons are kept in the bedroom for some reason. Yudhishthira is in there with Draupadi, and Arjuna cannot kind of step into that.
And
I mean, that's what's interesting, is that when we're talking about these kind of transgressive texts, they aren't necessarily texts where anything goes. Right? Even with the tantras, especially with the tantras, this is happening in a framework of very, very specific rules about who can do these practices and who can't. And so we're kind of forced, as modern readers or whatever we are on this side of the 21st century, we're forced to think, well, it's not that they don't have any rules. It's that the rules are different. Like the rules constituting sexual morality, the rules constituting kind of taboos and things, they're there, but they're different. And that's very hard for us to think about, because we kind of exist in a culture where you either follow the rules or you don't follow the rules. The idea that the rules could be different is very bizarre.
I mean, the rules reminds me, there's this one Mahachina Tara Tantra, where there's this weird sort of intersection between Hinduism and Buddhism, where there's this Rishi Vashishta, and he's trying to gain the favor of Ma Tara. And Tara is also a Hindu sort of deity. She's part of the Dasha Mahavidyas and so on. So he's trying
I didn't know.
Yeah. So he's trying to get, a vision of Ma Tara, and he's going on doing her sadhana for a long, long, long time. And then just nothing happens. Okay. And this is a common theme, like you saw in Virupa as well with Vajvarahi, and he starts getting frustrated, and he wants to sort of give up, and he wants to curse Tara, right?
Imagine how often this happens in a monastery, that 50% of your stories need to be about like what to do when religion disappoints you.
Absolutely. Right. And just as he's about to curse Tara, Ma Tara appears, and she's like, you know what? You're doing it wrong.
Naturally. Okay. Tell me how to do it, Matara.
You need a guru. Okay. You need a guru who's actually an expert on Tara, on me, basically. And Vashishta, who's this guru? Where can I find him? And she says, okay, there's this guy called the Buddha, and he lives in Mahachina, which is China, as in China, almost. Like, I mean, not modern China, obviously, but then somewhere
far,
up there. And you have to learn my sadhana from the Buddha. And
which Buddha is this? Sometimes I live in Polyworld so much that Vajrayana stuff gets me all turned around.
I mean, it's the Buddha. I mean, he's a Buddha who's in Mahachina.
Okay.
So maybe this is somewhere around the eastern states. So we're talking about east of Sikkim, right? Okay. So this is Assam or Acham. Which one is it? I don't know. Assam, I think. Yeah, that area is where they think this is also scholars or whatever. And so Vashishta is like, okay, fine, I'll go get teachings from this Buddha guy. So he goes all the way up there, and then he looks for the Buddha, and he essentially finds the Buddha in the middle of like a party almost.
That's what the Buddha is famous for.
Yeah.
Partying.
So the Buddha is in the middle of this party, just weird stuff going on that, maybe there's all these women, and then there's the Buddha, there's like
Spare our
drink.
viewers your immorality. I don't want to hear what the Buddha was doing at that party.
And then he goes, and you're like, bro, you're like the guru who's supposed to be teaching me the Mahachina Tara Tantra, and what are you doing, bro? This is against the rules. And then the Buddha is like, bro, the Tara Tantra has no rules. It's Swaicha. It's your will. That's the rule. And there's no direction that you're supposed to do this in. There's no time that you're supposed to do this in. There's no fasting premises. It's basically almost a free for all. and Vasishtha is just, he's mind blown because he's trying to follow these rules when he's doing the Tara, and Tara comes and she's like, you're doing it wrong, and the way to do it is just to do whatever you want, almost.
Okay, so now we have gone through the sort of tantric magic trick where I just said, well, tantra doesn't mean there's no rules, and then you pulled an example of a text where tantra does mean there's no. I mean, this is constantly what tantra is getting itself stuck in. Is like, do you want any rules or do you want no rules? Is it all yourself? Is it not at all?
Yeah, and here's the thing, right? A lot of these siddhis are, and these things that you gain are kind of questionable as well, right? So a lot of these siddhis, for example, in a lot of the tantras, even the highest tantras, you'll get stuff about, how you can fly, for example, right? And how you can become a king. So there are mantras and there are specific ritual practices for how to become a king, or there are specific ritual practices for how to kill your enemies, right? And then there are some ones where you're like, how you can control people, so Vashikaran or something. Okay. And it's kind of weird. It's unclear in many of these texts whether they actually mean what they say. Because a lot of times Tantra is written in this very obscure sort of a, you don't know what's going on kind of language.
And it's difficult Sanskrit. I mean, this goes back to our discussion of what Sanskrit is. Every time you're in a new genre, the Sanskrit changes. All the words mean different things. The grammar is different. It's just dense.
Yeah, and then it's the Sanskrit is one thing, and then the words that they use are pretty difficult because to figure out what they're saying. And like, for example, when they say Shukra, right, that's one of the offerings you should make. Does that mean semen, or is that what
Venus, clear light, jewels, maybe.
Jewels, just milk in some sense. So it's very unclear what these texts mean, and later commentaries have sort of, a lot of commentaries have discussed what they mean. Many of them will try to sort of go the conservative route where they interpret this to mean a metaphor. So killing your enemies is actually killing your kleshas or your poisons or whatever. And these 5 transgressive drinks, right, like blood, urine, semen, etc., are actually supposed to be these 5 ways of dualistic thinking, and the 5 meats, for example, are your parts of your body, or the Panchatattvas or something, and you have to recognize that all is the same taste. They're essentially empty, or they're essentially Brahma. And so it's very unclear, because historically you get a lot of controversy with Tantra as well between the sort of conservative monastic followers and then the more lively, let's say, tantric people. And it's a very difficult sort of subject to navigate around. And it's prone to misinterpretation as well, because right now in the West, a lot of Tantra is just sex.
Yeah, the aesthetics of religion over like whatever you want to do.
Yeah, whatever you want to do.
Just feel it, man. Just chill out.
And now you look up a book on Tantra, and it's usually some book about...
It's actually like a picture from the Kama Sutra.
Yeah, Kama Sutra. And even the Kama Sutra is a horribly misinterpreted text. And so I think there's a fine sort of balance where we're talking about one of the pleasure, one of the sort of dharmas is kama and artha, right? Pleasure is not supposed to be this very bad thing, as modern sort of moral thought would have it. But it's not a free for all as well, where it's all you can do whatever you want. So it's very weird how you fit these stories into the overall cultural narrative, especially nowadays, where these practices would be considered sort of something wrong or bad or something. But then these exist.
I mean, in some ways, it's like what's happened with like punk, this movement that came about at the end of the 20th century, where it was supposed to be, we're doing everything wrong, we're sticking it to the man, we're transgressing, we're doing these different things. And then the more people see punks, dressing a certain way, behaving a certain way, the more people are like, well, we kind of like punks. And then that culture grows, and then suddenly Hot Topic is getting, millions and millions of dollars selling things that are supposed to be against culture. And you get a reversal of what's supposed to be transgressing society, then becoming popular, becoming institutionalized. So that question hangs over the head of any revolutionary movement in the same way it hangs over Buddhism, which is supposed to be all about revolution and a rejection of Brahmanical orthodoxy, but really you have monasteries.
I mean, but even Brahmanical orthodoxy, you get plenty of stories in the Puranas as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's not always clear what that means historically.
It's not very clear what that means. You get stories of Shiva and Parvati, for example. You have the story of Kalidasa being cursed because when he was writing the Kumara Sambhava, that he became too explicit with the love scenes regarding Shiva and Parvati. So Parvati curses Kalidasa, and he's unable to finish his text. And you get other stories regarding Vishnu, who takes on many forms of women, especially during the Samudra Manthan, where he's the one who is having to distribute the Amrita. So he takes on this very beautiful woman form, and all the asuras sort of lust after Vishnu in this sexy form, let's say. And then even Shiva sometimes, he sort of Shiva and Vishnu have children because of that, and Shiva was supposed to be this restrained guy and so on. He's the one to overcome Kama, right, with the third eye, and with the Devas drinking Soma, which is essentially like in an intoxicating drink. Like in the previous episode, we talked about the Devi Mahatmya, where the Devi herself is drunk. She's intoxicated on liquor. So I have no idea how sort of we are to navigate this. It's people like to pretend it's like not there.
Yeah, either like you said, you wash it away with it. Well, it's just a metaphor, or they didn't really do it, or they did it but in a different way. And really, we're just stuck in a moment where any decision we make about what our past was, what the history was, is ultimately just a reflection of what we want in the present. Yeah, do we want a conservative religion? Yeah. Do we want a progressive religion? What are we doing with all this history we have?
I mean, one of the this is the last example. I think the Rasa Leela is a very famous example, right? And there are sort of women leave their husbands because they are so infatuated with Krishna, and there's this almost like this, especially with Krishna, there's almost this devotional love that you're supposed to love Krishna and
love him in a way that gets in the way of all your responsibilities, like to your husband or to your community.
Mirabai, for example, right? Exactly. So it's very unclear how we make sense of this, but a lot of things that we would consider weird were there, and they're present, and it's up to us to figure out how to deal with this, I guess, personally.
When you see a Buddhist monk on the street, it's your choice whether to beat him up and take his bowl or not. That's on you.
So yeah, it was nice conversation.
Nice conversation.